Meanwhile, Arboran gathering some more troops. At the moment, these are just wars of consolidation after the absolute madness. There was just 24-hour war from last time. People just trying to gobble up who they can. Nobody yet going after Coruvia, which is interesting. Coruvia still allied to Geberd and Marhold. I wonder if that's an alliance they're going to keep. Or if, for example, Kryenvar comes in and says, "Oi, stop it. I thought you were role-playing as a mercenary." Oh, I was. Everything in the name of good business, including selling ships. It's just hilarious because I do get a boost to consumer goods factories required of like 5% because I'm too busy selling all the ships, so I can't actually build any for myself. It's like consumer goods in exchange for 20% dockyard output. I've been trying to build one solitary battleship, which was very nearly completed for like 3 years now. Give you a civilian factory for most of the game. Hey, those mercenaries were good. 18 combat width. In fact, they're 20 combat widths now. With AA. And they could pierce the French tanks already. I just hope that I can double down on the AA guns. I should probably try and get a artillery manufacturer as soon as I can. Although that would require actually having political power, which so far has been beyond me. For a large chunk of yesterday's game, I was sitting on like minus 300. Okay, so Sojasat fighting against Magama once again. Sojasat with another 50,000 just sitting on the sidelines, you know, just in case they need it. And Magama putting in another brave fight right there, but just not able to pull anything meaningful off. They're not actually taking too much damage in terms of manpower. It's going to be mostly their mercenaries that are taking the hits here. But Magama have lost 87,000, Sojasat have lost 172,000, but Sojasat still have 110,000 in the bank. Didn't they have like 500,000 at one stage? I know they were well over their maximum, and I think they spent a bunch of that manpower over the maximum to build their force limit up from like 17 to 200. Yep. But they are losing manpower now. Do they have much drill? Yes. Does Magama? No. Wait, are you saying that having political power is something that is possible in Kaiserreich? Not for two Sicilies, it isn't. Especially because that same shipyard for Spirit costs you 0.5 political power. Right, half of your income. And that's just too expensive. I like the idea of that focus, but why the political power cost? I don't get that. And for 5% consumer goods, it's just not really worth it. Like, if it was 20% dockyard output for, say, 10% consumer goods and no political power malice, that would be an interesting focus. And then the decision of whether you keep it or not would actually be a decision. But as it stands, it's just like, there is no reason for me to keep this, even though I can. I might as well just nationalise the shipyards, get rid of that penalty, and then build shipyards faster. One reason I like Austria is you have lots of political power. Sadly, all the good companies are focus locked and you don't have the war support to raise your economy and manpower laws. Yeah. I actually have no idea what two Sicilies companies are like. That is something I'll need to check. I've been a little bit more concerned with my neighbour to the north. And building up my industry as quickly as possible. And considering we start with like half of the industry of the SRI, now that we have civilian factory parity, I'm pretty happy with that. He's still got like double the military factories, but at least I can now continue building up at the same rate as him. In fact, probably faster because I have a lot of construction buffs. So those mercenary volunteers have paid for themselves. Unfortunately, Sojasat just continuing to feed troops in here. And it does... yeah, that's a stack wipe. Oh, they pieced. What was offered and what was accepted. So it looks like Sojasat did not want Magama escaping to the mountains. And Sojasat may well be putting some pressure on the spine here, trying to get as many entries to the Wood Elf and Phoenix Empire lands as they can. Because Soldier Sat's going to have the force limit and the finance to actually threaten each of these entrances. Interesting. This... I would be getting very worried if I was the Phoenix Empire right now. Like, yeah, there's the little buffer here, but I don't think that's going to last for very long. Does Soldier Sat have a colonist? Yeah, they have 2 of them. Which they'll be using to colonize this area, I believe. Nope, that's not colonizable. Probably just these. Yeah. There's not a huge amount left to do. And that's not colonizable either. So they've pretty much reached the maximum extent. And unfortunately, Lake Federation, I think, is always going to be very powerful if they manage to unite, because there is no fake China. Once there's a fake China, and in fact, once there's like fake China territories and fake Africa territories, I think that a lot of these nations that tend to blob spectacularly are going to find themselves a little bit more constricted. I like that all of Italy's companies can be used by all the Italian tags. You just need to own the land the company is based out of. Interesting. Did they take the gold? No. Yes. Yes, they did. That's probably why they snaked out here, so they could take the gold, because that is a beefed up province. Oh, it's Magama's capital. Oh! That I hadn't realised. It's a gold province that becomes a coal province. That's an interesting decision, because that basically means you can dev as much as you like out of Magama. And if it depletes, you don't care. It's going to switch to coal anyway. Oh, Magama's economy is dead anyway. Like, they took... Yeah, they just went bankrupt. They did precisely what I assumed they would. So they have bankruptcy for another 4 years. The truce with Soldier Sat is going to last until 82. Okay, that truce is a long one. So they should have been able to recover by then, but honestly, Magama's in trouble. If they get no other allies, they are in trouble. 20% inflation. Well, that would have been because of the gold. I never realised that Magama was a gold province. And their current income only just up there. And they've unfortunately had to take a loan right after they bankrupted, which is forcing them to pay 1.3 interest, because that loan has an interest rate of 10.2%. Ouch. There are -2 to stability, they're going to get internal conflicts. Yeah, it's not a fun time. It's a very, very risky strategy. So Arboran is now fighting against Ivar and Silent Repose. So continuing to grab territories here, although they are starting to get quite a lot of aggressive expansion. And there are quite a few players with aggressive expansion on Arboran who do not like Arboran. Phoenix Empire is fighting against Elisna at last. I'm actually a little surprised that Elisna's still alive. Wasn't Elisna a player at one stage? But I don't think it has been for a while. Drake's Guard fighting against Tur, Bizan, Seriand, Ashenade, Varn, Sugamba, Balakar, Idlebury, Cerulean, Lerampar, Tellum, Moonhaven, Order Adresia, and Silverforge. Right, that's the Conwellian War, of course it is. Krynvar going against Road Warrior and Skewered Drakes. They're trying to take more of the mountain territories, and Began's Expedition, Thieving Arrow, and Argodston. And this should be concerning the Ram Dwarves, because they did not go after our... oh wait, Argodston's up here. No, that's Ordlum. Right, Ordlum's down here. Ordston's down here. It's the... yeah, it's going after Cold Rage's former nation. Cold Rage is another one that withdrew. And taking out the last of these dwarves. So getting a lot of the Spine of the World Mountains here for the filthy elves. Blech. Holy Victor, meanwhile, fighting against... Oh, we've got someone joining. Atos, who was Drake Guard. They'll point to Belizenos to go exile and go to Rezenkand. Oh, right, Grex. And then killed by Vern the Betrayer. I mean, Vern has betrayed so many people at this point. I am not surprised. What happened to the command? What do you mean, what happened to the command? They've always been an AI. Oh, the blue blob. That's one of Rahan's minions that split and got independence. So because a lot of this territory is Rahan culture, if the command overextends and gets rebels, then they can split up and get separatists, and I think that's what happened now. It just happened to be a very, very big separatist. They do. Oh, they do. Artos has joined Ovdal Khanzad. Okay, that's good. Because Ovdal Khanzad is one of those nations that could really be a bit of a balance of, or a kingmaker in this region. But I suspect it's too little too late. Ovdal Khanzad's been growing incredibly slowly. Yeah, they do control 4 different holds, which is going to give them more wealth, but they need to strike out, conquer this as quickly as possible, and then try and grab these holds as quickly as possible, which will mean a pretty high-risk war against the command. And the command does not have any back entrances into it. No, it's not even vulnerable for an attack from this direction. So the command is completely isolated right now. So if Ovdal Khanzad can take that, they'll have this nice little bastion. And Ovdal Khanzad can fight defensive wars, and they can fight them really well because of that artillery bonus. But for that to happen, they're going to need to be pretty aggressive. Artos was the ogre and dropped for now. Seems to have taken over Ovdal, if I see correctly. So he was Magama. Yeah, that... I'm okay with that. Magama was not in a good place, and I don't think they were going to recover. He tried. He tried fighting against Soldier Sat, and it just didn't work. Soldier Sat's too strong at this point. Remember from watching some dedicated EU4 streamers, everyone bashes if you take a start date that's not 1444. One of my favourite games was actually the 1776 start. Playing as the Americans, then having President John Paul Jones beating the Redcoats at sea before they could even land a single soldier on American soil. That was fun, because then you're also up against like Frederick the Great, Catherine the Great, Maria Theresa, George the whatever George in England. It's like all of the great figures of history of that era just around at the same time. But yeah, they are a bit of a mess. There's too many of them. There should be 2, 3 maximum. Because I agree, having one that kind of starts midway through the game would be nice. It would. George III, great figure of history. Just because he lost the colonies. He's also responsible for thrashing the French, so... Imagine having a whole armada to blockade Fort Britain instead of that single revolutionary ship we had in real life. Yeah, see, John Paul Jones just needed more resources. Head on, Bassos. Yeah, George was not insane at that point. And in fact, it's kind of assumed that one of the reasons that he went mad was because of the stress of that. I'm trying to remember if it was George III who was during the 7 Years' War. I imagine it was. Which is basically World War Zero. Yeah, it must have been, because it was the 7 Years' War was the whole reason that Britain raised the taxes on the colonies. Because Britain spent lavishly defending the 13 colonies against the French from Canada, from Quebec. And then the colonies basically refused to repay the debt that they had incurred. That's the whole reason the tax was being levied. Just like, yeah, we defended you, here's the bill. I ain't paying that. (1756 to 1763). Belligerents, Great Britain. But who was the King of Britain at that time? George Washington. George the Second. So George III was just after the 7 Years' War. His father was George II. So there you go. History with Mordred. And also Wikipedia. Oh, he took over in the middle of it. Okay. Funny thing is, the Americans were taxed less than the English in London were. Yeah, it's true. The Yankees were just angry that they had to pay any kind of tax. Sounds like America. We're trying to save you. I ain't paying for it. But it's literally your lives. Nope. So Arboran raising quite a few troops here for some reason. The wars against Ibervar and Silent Repose about to end. You recruiting up to your force limit? Oh, wow, you're way under it. Oh, I think that's because you were short on manpower up until now. But then Arboran uses mostly mercenaries. So I think that Arboran, under that guy, actually had a lot less troops in general. So that he could recruit the mercenaries up to his force limit. Which is a pretty solid strategy for them. As the small country, you basically do the same. Or you just, maintain those mercenaries. So since we're in a seeming period of peace with no player wars, any chance we can have a rundown of player idea groups? That's an excellent idea. So Boyce Carvo at the moment having gone strategic, industrial, diplomatic and defensive. So strategic is basically the new offensive ideas. It has a lot of combat ability, for example, for the infantry, and it's a big buff. It's got siege stuff. It's got advisor stuff. It's just a very, very solid all-rounder. Then strategic plus industrial gives you national manpower and artillery damage from back row, so even more artillery power, especially with the artillery combat ability. So that's a very good combo. Industrial being the more the more production-orientated aspects of economic ideas, with some other stuff like even more advisor cost, goods produced, dev cost, construction cost, production efficiency. Then diplomatic ideas, which I always found questionable until I saw that diplomatic plus defensive equals fire damage received -5, shock damage received -5, national manpower plus 10 from industrial. No, you know what? I still don't really see the point of diplomatic ideas. You are not a nation that vassal swarms. You're a nation that just gobbles everything up. And it's at this point that I realise it's got about 20 vassals. 4. With 2 trade companies. So, to an extent, fine. I can kind of see it, though I'm still questionable. And then defensive ideas, which has the regular defensive idea, morale buff, gives you damage received reduction. So actually defensive plus diplomatic would basically mean 10% less damage received from fire and shock. Land force limit with industrial. Okay, I can see that. Then we've got Ovdol Khanzad, though bear in mind Ovdol Khanzad's been AI for the last like 2 sessions. So they've gone strategic industrial, which again, very solid start, and then diplomatic. It had to be a diplomatic idea group. The other options... Oh, I can kind of see why they're taking diplomatic now, because the other diplo ideas are just not that interesting for a landlocked nation. Trade, maybe, but they're not in a very good position to do trade. Imperial would be the only other option, really. And that's vassal force limit contribution, which is pointless for you. Yeah, Imperial's good if you're going to go cavalry. That's about it. Arboran. Quantity economic. Quantity for the force limit and the extra troops. Economic to be able to pay for them. Economic now having less of the development buffs, although it does still have dev cost, but it's only -10 instead of 20. They've got some boat stuff, but none of the, or fewer of the production efficiency bits. And it's more about finance control. Then trade ideas, obviously for getting money, Arboran is in the Dame's Head trade node, so that makes a ton of sense. In fact, quantity economic, what do you get with that? Dev cost and land force limit plus 10. Quantity plus trade is national tax and admin. Economic plus quality is morale of armies and reinforced speed. Trade efficiency and production efficiency. Dev cost we already saw. And then trade... Economic is trade efficiency, production efficiency... Oh, trade and quality, which you've just taken, is blockade efficiency. Interesting. Then quality is still that mixture of land fighting and naval fighting, with a reduced discipline, but now you get the yearly professionalism. So everyone's going for that second military idea so far. Adenica should be a bit of a different system because they're going to be focusing very heavily on cavalry, and in fact if you take a look at Adenica's cavalry combat ability, it is plus 53%, which is pretty nice. And the plus 53%, by the way, this is something only just recently was explained to me by some of the developers, is the combat ability modifies these numbers, and it's just gone up to 73% in fact. So it's basically saying, okay, you've got 2 shock times 0.73, so that's going to be 3.25 or something like that shock instead of 2, which is then further multiplied by the actual shock pips, although the pips have less of a bearing than this. You can still get charity. Okay, so what else do you have? Just double checking to see if you just went to war or something, but no. Noble Academia, which is pretty much entirely cavalry and also some technology stuff. But like shock damage plus 75. Wow, you do so much damage in the shock phase. Manpower, leaders without upkeep, reinforced cost. Miltech, shock damage, army tradition decay, and then cavalry buffs. And then these got Imperial ideas, which with Noble Academia gives another 10% cavalry combat, and then the cav cost -10. Economic income from vassals and vassal contribution, which is not very useful. And then economic ideas plus Noble Academia is cavalry cost and yearly army tradition decay. That's a good combination as well. So Adenica's commanders are also going to be very good. So for example, they got Claremont Hurlin right now is a level 5 shock. That shock output is going to be devastating. Imagine if a Denica gets like a level 11 shock wizard. Yikes. Phoenix Empire. Phoenix Empire currently on quantity and economic. So quantity economic is like base game vanilla meta. Not particularly innovative. And then they've gone for trade ideas as well because they just control a vast amount of money that just flows through here. And they just want to capture as much of it as possible, which I totally get. So trade is going to mean that the Phoenix Empire is going to be a lot wealthier, which is important because we have seen that the Phoenix Empire isn't so much a military entity as a supporting Kryenvar in their fights entity. And the main way that they can do that is just by paying them. It was Phoenix Empire subsidies buffing Kryenvar versus small country subsidies buffing Marhold and Adenica in the big war. Drake's Guard, Colony, Imperial Quantity. What does Imperial Quantity do? That's a lot of idea stuff. Imperial Quantity is morale of armies and military advisor cost minus 15%. Okay, that's an interesting one. And then Industrial Absolutism +1. Quantity, Industrial Army Tradition +1. That's nice. But still only on the 3 at the moment. Conwell. Strategic Economic. And the combo of Strategic Economic is Morale of Armies, Army Tradition Decay, and then Trade, Morale of Navies. So Strategic Trade means that Conwell's Navy is going to be a bit better. Then they also have Quantity coming in with Economic, which is Dev Cost and Land Force Limit, and Trade, which is National Tax and Admin Efficiency. Gnomish Hierarchy, going innovative first of all, which does make a lot of sense because the gnomes are all about having good technology, and this just allows them to double down on that. Then they have exploration ideas because they wanted to go colonial, although they did get into the colonial game really late. So a lot of the really choice territory unfortunately is lost to them, so this might have been a bit of a poor investment. But then again, Gnomish Hierarchy has also been very, very passive when it comes to events in Anbennar proper. Yeah, I'm not sure. Then plutocratic ideas I really like because it just gives you lots more Republican tradition stuff. Sorry, not Republican tradition. It's a good balance between financial and military because you get stuff like the extra morale, you get stuff like the manpower recovery, mercenary discipline, and then you also get merchants, caravan power, goods produced, governing capacity. It's just a really nice, versatile idea group. And combined with innovative is prestige and advisor cost, which is awesome. Exploration is colonist and global settler. So Faceless could have 4 colonists, and right now none of them are doing anything because he was so late into the game. And that's it from them. Defensive gives yearly naval tradition. We did see that Faceless was starting to build a navy. And then innovative is infantry combat ability and advisor cost. It's not as good as the innovative offensive? Or no, innovative quality from vanilla, is it? One of them gives like plus 20% infantry combat ability, which is amazing. Although I think that might have been nerfed to 10. Dominic Eberthil has now taken naval ideas. So we did see Eberthil fighting against Yordland. And Yordland had naval ideas. Eberthil did not. They were relying purely on their national ideas. And did suffer more casualties than they probably expected, despite the fact that they have all of these modifiers, giving them morale, giving them naval maintenance modifier, and then giving them force limit. But now their ships are also going to hit as hard as the damage that they can take. So exploration plus the others, so exploration plus strategic is settler chance and colonial range. Exploration industrial is global settler increase. They do have 2 colonists currently working. Industrial plus naval is national sailors and national naval force limit, and global settler increase. And strategic is national manpower and artillery from back row. Strategic plus naval